Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Video Game Guide podcast with me, Peter Cruikshank. This is my first experience doing a podcast, so please bear with me if things are a bit, shall we say, rustic or rough around the edges. Today we are joined by my good friend Ed Pulis to talk about his all-time top 5 favourite video games. Now, your top 5 games doesn't necessarily mean what you think is the best or most highly acclaimed games of all time. This is more your own personal top 5 gaming experiences, with some honourable mentions along the way.
Yeah, I would say just growing up, the kind of it's just the kind of cultural influence. Maybe not the cultural influence. Yes, kind of the cultural influence, but also
Is it a personal thing or is it more...
it's a real personal thing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Just in terms of like when you watch a movie or listen to
Yeah. So there
music
could be games in here where people completely maybe think, I'm not sure why he's chosen something like that, but it's because it's what it meant to you at the time. You were that age, and there's that kind of impact, and it's sort of something where you still think about it today, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. It's like it's just one of those things where you'll see something and it will forever influence your decision making, maybe.
Yeah.
In a very sort of like a subconscious way. You might not necessarily refer to these things to do general activities in life, but they've had an impact, right?
I think anybody who plays games is gonna have certain games where they can talk about them and say, well-respected games, they're kind of eternal. But then there might be games in there that say you can sort of say, this just means so much to me, and even like 10, 15, 20 years later, I still think about this game, I still talk about this game because I had an amazing experience with it,
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I mean it's kind of tricky because it's like when you hang out with people and then they quote famous films or they make references to
and you feel a bit of pressure
passages in the
sometimes.
book. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or like you just and then people ask you why you like that thing so much, right? And then it might kind of bleed into like your
Yeah,
taste in
you've got to,
clothing or
you've got to sort of appreciate each other's passion, haven't you? You got to, whatever they love, it's even if you might disagree with them, you just got to think, well, if they're passionate about it, at least we share that passion, even if it's for a different game. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter whether you're some kind of fanboy or whatever. If you sort of love something, then that's kind of the end of it, really, isn't it? On your list.
So just the 5 top games. So my 5 top games. I'll start with, I mean, there's a lot of games that there's a few games I've played. But the ones that
more than a few games you've played.
Yeah, there's more than a few games. But the ones that really kind of influenced me, I'll start with the first game. There's no real order here, right? In terms of history, in terms of like timeline, but
yeah,
I would say the Street Fighter series.
Oh yeah.
Was a big one for me. Yeah, it was huge. Probably for a lot of people as well. And I never played the original Street Fighter.
Well, I was going to say, are you talking about the original, or are you basically talking about the big one, Street Fighter 2?
Street Fighter 2 is the one that I experienced for the first time.
Yeah.
Because I never really, I don't think we ever. I think my brother might have played the original one.
Oh, right. Okay.
But I never really sort of, I didn't really know about it until Yeah, I think I'm not sure if we went to the arcades or if it was in a magazine somewhere.
It was
But I
released
remember,
in 1991, I think,
yeah,
by
yeah,
Capcom.
that's right. Yeah,
Good
by
old Capcom.
Capcom.
Yeah.
Yep. And
So why?
yeah,
What is it about Street Fighter 2 then that
I
really
think it
that you
for
like,
me
basically, or that you
it was
love?
literally no, no, it was literally everything about the game, like from like the music was like sensational. Like, I'm obviously saying this from my own opinion, but the music's just like it. I could be sitting working or, you know, at home, and I could just listen to the music. I don't even have to
Mm.
play the game to know what it is. Um, and yeah, and not just the music, but just the artwork. And at the time as well, you didn't really have like the same level. Like we had there was the arcades, and there wasn't this thing where you could play those kind of versions on the home consoles. You can do that now because obviously the machines are so crazy good. But in those days, there was a real difference.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a visual fidelity, there was the frames of animation, there was the art style. There was nothing like it really. I mean, the original you could do like fireballs and that kind of stuff, but there wasn't this sort of mechanism where you'd
Yeah.
have
It was like the
three punch,
prototype,
three
wasn't it?
levels.
Really,
Yeah,
it
like you
wasn't
had three
fully
levels of
realized.
punch. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, totally. It wasn't fully realized at that point. You could parry, you could do like three punches, three levels of kick, three levels of like punch damage and shit.
It was like the kind
And
of perfect synergy of
yeah, exactly.
everything that a fighting game could be,
Yeah, it
like
was a perfect synergy
fully
of
fully
like,
realized, wasn't it?
yeah, it was pretty much like we'd played games before. I played Final Fight, at home, and we there was just nothing like it. It
Yeah.
was literally just this cultural phenomenon, if I can say that right,
Yeah.
where it had such an impact,
Yeah.
and it kind of bled out into society in different ways, right? You can go online now, there's like memes and they made a movie,
Yeah.
and there's like a whole bunch of anime. Um,
I think it was
People just,
a really phenomenon. I don't think people who were around at the time, they don't really appreciate the phenomenon that it was when it came
yeah,
out. Because when
it
it came
was,
out, they people just went crazy for it, and
yeah,
they had to like people like the arcade owners were just shipping in like multiple machines, so they'd have like a row of Street Fighter 2 machines because it was so popular. People like queuing up to get on the machines. So even when they had a few Street Fighter 2 machines, people still queuing up to get on them for their go. So they were thinking, well, we need to get rid of these other arcades that aren't just sitting there not being played and get some more Street Fighter 2 arcade machines in. It was that
yeah,
popular.
yeah. I mean, this is it, and I think it was a product of its time, right? I mean, it was, you know, like
Everything
it's
is.
funny because yeah, this is it, right? So I remember like this is probably showing my age a bit, but my brother had got or I think my parents had gifted my brother the Street Fighter 2 Amiga version,
Hmm.
and it was terrible. When you look at it
Oh,
now, it's
really?
terrible.
That's a
It's
shame that because
garbage.
Amiga sort of conversions are pretty good back then. So
Yeah,
for it not to be
it
able
was just
to keep up
well,
with
it was not.
the
Yeah,
arcade
it was
version
just not
means that
really. There wasn't. There wasn't enough. There wasn't enough frames of animation, so it was like clunky and slow.
it wasn't smooth.
Uh,
Yeah,
it wasn't smooth. I mean, it wasn't terrible. It was playable, but at the time we loved it because it was an arcade conversion, um, on a home system, and then we also had this crappy cheater joystick. I don't know if you remember, but like it was a one button joystick, and you
yeah,
can't play
I do
Street Fighter with
remember
one
that. Yeah,
button. And but even though it was so bad, when you look at it now, at the time we were like, it
yeah,
was amazing. It was incredible. And I don't think, it's funny over the years, I don't think I ever like, some games I play and I think, oh, this is pretty good. But I never go back to them, right?
yeah,
But with Street Fighter, I've always gone back to it. Like
yeah, yeah,
there's Street Fighter 6 that's coming out, and I'm
yeah.
kind of sort of pseudo excited about that, even
That's
though
like
I'm
it's
not
I
sure about
suppose
it,
it's like
but
a story mode to it, isn't there?
Yeah, which is
So
quite unique.
you're like a kind of young fighter, and then you have all the well, they're not, yeah, they're old fighters, but they're still looks they're very ageless, aren't they? They look like
Yeah,
they haven't aged a
yeah,
day,
yeah,
and
exactly. I
they're
mean,
like they're
yeah,
kind of like the legends, aren't they, in the Street
yeah,
Fighter
and I mean
world?
the game is like 34 years. No, it's 30 years old now, right? So you'd think like they would be in
Yeah,
this,
over 30, yeah.
60s and 70s, but and just the characters were just so iconic. Like you had
Yes,
the
yeah,
feud
definitely.
between Ken and Ryu. Can't say his name properly. You had Chung Li.
Chung
Um,
Li's amazing, isn't
yeah,
she?
there was like
Yeah.
M Bison that was
How
based
iconic is
on.
she?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you had Ben Bison, who was kind of based on like Mike Tyson. There was like Sagat. You had like Blanca. Like it it was like different countries, different styles. There was just you had animated backgrounds. You could damage. There were
Yeah,
like parts of the game where you could actually like smash a car or smash barrels and stuff. So I don't know. It was just this complete package.
yeah. There was so much to it. Even as a spectator sport, it was amazing,
Yeah, it's
and
amazing. Yeah, yeah,
and it became that as well, didn't it? The Street Fighter Championships. The people, like, so many people be watching that, and
yeah.
you
They,
know,
I think it's called Evo. Is it Evo? I don't know.
yeah, something
Yeah,
like that. Yeah,
yeah.
and
Um,
yeah, because they brought out Championship Edition and
so many versions. Yeah, so
Turbo
many
as well.
versions.
Because Turbo was like it was a faster version, wasn't it? It was just everything was
Yeah,
just
yeah. And then the game just got better and better. Like,
yeah, yeah.
and I feel like I think that's why it deserves a place.
Mm,
I know it's a bit of a. I mean, some of my choices are a little bit cliched, but I honestly feel. I mean, that's just my personal choice,
yeah,
but it had such an impact on me. Um,
yeah. But
that
it's obvious that you love it. You can see the love coming through.
yeah,
You know.
it's just great. There's a lot of great games out there. Don't get me wrong. There's so many great games that
Yeah,
probably don't should be in a list.
yeah. But
Um,
they're gonna make you feel warm and fuzzy inside in 30 years.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So
I
yeah,
think Street
that's
Fighter
my
Two does that, doesn't it?
yeah. I mean, like I said, I could be anywhere, right? I don't even have to see the game. If there's a bit of music playing, I know straight away what it is. I don't even have to see the game. Like if there's like piece of music from the Rio stage or from
Yeah.
like Guile or whatever, if that's blaring away, if I happen to be walking down the street and I
Or
hear that, I'm
you
like,
you
I know exactly
probably
what that is.
recognize the sound effects as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you can't don't get any, it's like Hadouken and
Yeah.
trying to think of some other ones, but like it had that kind of impact. I mean, we went to once I was at work, we had a Christmas party, and we dressed up like me and another guy. We dressed up like characters. I think it was three of us. We dressed up like the characters out of Street Fighter, even though it was like freezing ass cold.
Yeah.
We turned up in like I think I was Akuma. He was like Ken, and we had another guy that was we had three of us. It was hilarious. It was so funny. And people know, right? People would see us and they would know who we were,
Yeah.
and it had that because of how important the game.
I'm taking it this
You know,
was like maybe years before cosplay kind of exploded.
it was probably just after we were just way too old for it, but it was just a Christmas party, so everyone that was the theme of the party, to get dressed up. But yeah, I feel like without Street Fighter, I do feel like, and actually, another thing as well is that, well, I mean, predominantly games. I think a lot of games these days are made by mixed. It's like fairly. A lot of people make games now from different countries. I was gonna say a mixed bag.
Yeah.
But in those days, you could really feel like with Street Fighter, it was a real Japanese influence.
Yeah.
And there was a succession of beat 'em ups, right? Straight after, you had like, um, well, even before and after, you had like King of the Fighters, and you had like, oh god, there's so many Soul Calibur and there's Power Stone I think it had such an impact that everybody was copying it,
Yeah.
and so that's why I think
Definitely,
it deserves.
Cool.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it deserves a place in that spot. So
Okay, so what about your second game?
So my second game in my list, and again, there's no specific order, but I had to put this in, um, purely because, okay, so I'm not a huge RPG guy, I have to say, and I don't think I've ever really been a huge RPG guy. I've tried, I just don't think I have like the patience for it. But the one game that I played back to back was Zelda Ocarina of Time.
When you say back to back, what do you mean?
So I literally played it from start to finish,
Oh, okay, all right.
and I might have done like the side quests as well.
I thought you meant as soon as you finished it, you started again.
Yeah, I could have easily picked it up again and started playing it again.
Wow.
Um, because I
So this came out on the
so this
GameCube?
came out on the
Oh,
no, this was
64.
on Nintendo 64.
Yeah,
So
in
I
98.
transitioned, yeah, so I
1998.
transitioned from PlayStation to Nintendo 64,
Oh, okay.
and there was a lot of
Because there was a
the
few years
Nintendo.
between them, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, Nintendo 64 was a bit of a weird machine in that it had, you know, at the time, a lot of systems were going to CD. They were all like PlayStation was CD, Sega Saturn was CD. There was a lot of CD-based games, right? And there was
Yeah,
good
yeah.
reason for that because you had high storage. The discs
Yes.
had loads of storage.
Yeah.
So Nintendo brought out the Nintendo 64. That was cartridge-based.
Yeah.
Now, some might say that was a real bad idea, and in a lot of ways, it kind of was because
There's
the
there
cartridges
is
were
there
really
is
expensive.
less room on the cartridge,
There's
at the time.
yeah, there's way less room on a cartridge. They're expensive to build, right? Like
Mm.
CD's just a bit of plastic that you print and then you're done. Whereas in cartridge needs a circuit board and plastic. So of course the consumer has to pay more money, right?
Still charge a lot for
Um,
those CDs though, didn't they?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And Nintendo had this stupid, not stupid, well, it's kind of stupid. Nintendo had this policy where um they had like an iron fist over like licensing and like they it's like if you're a developer and then you have to like with a CD, I'm sure it wasn't that expensive. Sony were pretty good with that,
Yeah.
whereas Nintendo would charge a ton of cash. They would take a chunk of cash from every sale of every game. Anyway, I'm digressing here, but so I remember having the Nintendo 64 because of another game,
I was going to
which is
say,
in my
did you get
yeah.
the 64 for Zelda or did you get 64?
No, so I got it from Mario 64. I remember seeing that from Mario. It
Ah,
was like it was amazing. Yeah, because
okay.
that I had when we were growing up, I had a Game Boy, and then I loved Super Mario Super Mario Land, I think it was called, and then I had friends that were loved Super Mario World
Yes.
on the Super Nintendo. So when I saw that, it was just like amazing. I thought I got to play it, and I got to get the system. So I got it, and then I remember reading about development, right, for future games. And the two games that I saw was GoldenEye and Zelda.
Yeah.
Um, and a buddy of mine said, "Look, Zelda is amazing. Like Link to the Past. We had it on Super Nintendo. It's just great." And I was just like, "Yeah, cool, cool, cool." I kind of, and at the time as well, it's not like Sony, right? Sony had like at that point, Sony had quite a good there was a lot of momentum, so there was a lot of development for Sony's PlayStation, right? So
Yeah.
whereas Nintendo had lost a lot of, they'd lost like Square was developing.
Yeah, they
I
stopped
think
doing
Square
Final
ended up,
Fantasy, didn't they? Which
yeah,
is a
on
big loss.
Nintendo, yeah. So there wasn't a lot of RPGs, right? I mean, there were a few, but not that many. And I, I remember when Zelda came out, and it was just amazing. Like the music, the atmosphere. Um, I just was not bored. Like we were waiting for the cartridge. The cartridge was actually gold as well, which was quite. I think that was I'm not sure if that
Nice
was like,
touch.
yeah, there was like a nice touch to it. But I remember playing it, and it was just, yeah, it's just, from start to finish. We just
Is it?
like the
Did you feel like it
beginning,
was
the ending.
something? Did you feel like it was something you'd not experienced before?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I
Yeah.
think it was like it was real time. The graphics were really good. It was kind of pseudo sort of open world as well. Nintendo had kind of delivered on what they said they were going to do, and considering how small the cartridge storage was, the game the game was long. I don't know how many hours, maybe 40 hours,
Hmm.
or these days it's probably doesn't sound a lot, but just like the progression, the music, the open worldness of it. There was so many different things that it kind of brought to the table. That there was like the targeting system.
Yeah.
Um, the cutscenes were great, and again, that was another problem with Nintendo. And the good thing about Sony was that Sony had you could record a ton of audio on a disc,
Yeah.
and
Sony
you'd
were
have
doing
no
kind
issues.
of cinematic games, weren't they?
Yeah,
With these
because you had
cutscenes.
the storage, right? Like you
Yes.
look at the Mega CD back in the day when it came out, and it was like this kind of system where it could produce, video and audio, no problems, right? Whereas
Mm.
if you look at Nintendo, which was like a later machine, it had issues with that, right? There wasn't a lot of storage. So, and if you play Zelda, there's no dialogue really. It's just
Mm.
text.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just like I guess it was a magical experience because there weren't a lot of titles for the Nintendo 64 that blew me away. And Mario and Zelda, they were just like quintessential Nintendo, right? They were quintessential games that were like,
Mm.
okay, this is what the system can do really well if it's been developed. If things have been really considered and developed, and that's what the Zelda was. Zelda was just this great game, and
Well,
in all not, yeah. Sorry.
Ocarina of Time was hailed as the greatest video game of all time for some time after it came out. I
Yeah, and
remember,
I can tell you to
it
this
came out, it
day,
always came like number one for maybe good 10, 15 years afterwards. It wasn't
yeah,
maybe until.
yeah, and I can believe that. I mean, to this day, I mean, if you look at what's happening at the moment, right? You've got and I've got it. I've got Zelda. It's the new Zelda. I forgot what the new Zelda is. There's two of them, right? Now, one's just been
Tears of
released.
the Gods has just been
Yeah,
released.
so Tears of the Gods just released, and there was one before that,
Breath
which
of
I
the
forgot.
Wild.
Breath of the Wild. So Breath of the Wild, I never really got into it.
Oh,
I
right.
try.
Okay.
I got to try. I got to try again. I've never really got into it.
I loved it.
The new one that's come out is supposed to be even better. It's supposed to be more sort of because this is the problem. This is
There's more
what
game
I
mechanics, even, isn't there? Even than Breath
yeah,
of the
and
Wild.
it's a tighter. It's like the problem with open world stuff is that if you don't you like I'm all about story, right, and characters. So I
Yeah.
feel like okay, open world's great. You can go anywhere, you can do anything.
But
But
you
I
lose
still
focus
feel
a bit,
like
don't you?
yeah, I still feel like you need to shoehorn a little bit of a story. Or, you need that, and I think that's what Ocarina was.
Hmm.
Ocarina was what those games maybe should have been,
You mean it was
or
like a
maybe Breath
perfect
of the Wild.
balance between the two?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You had okay. If you look at Ocarina of Time, you could argue that it's not really open world and the maps are not that big, right? And
But at the
to an
time, you got to think
extent,
about of the time, haven't you?
yeah, exactly. Because obviously now you've got like so much storage and you've got graphical horsepower, but back in those days, it was perfect. It
Hmm.
literally gave you enough to work with, yet follow the story and the boss sequences, the bit at the beginning with the tree, about how the tree's dying and how the world formed, and it's a bit of a backstory and just the style. Um, you know, I don't know. It was just for me. It was just a real, and you had the analog stick and all
Yeah.
that kind of jazz.
Yeah.
And for me at the time, it was just, coming from an RPG point of view,
Yeah.
it was amazing. I mean, I always remember. I don't know if you've played it, Pete, but I always
I have
remember
played
there's a
it. Yeah.
sequence. Yeah, you have.
I've played it all.
So there's a bit in the game where you fight yourself, right?
I haven't played it that far. Yeah.
And
I'm ashamed to admit.
it's like a mirror, right? And at the time I was like, oh my, I think it was a mirror floor, like the ground was like reflective,
Yeah.
or it was, or the character was reflective. And I thought at the time, my God, this looks amazing. It just
Yeah.
looked incredible. I mean,
But
that
there's
generation of
almost like something maybe you've not experienced in a game before, and then you and maybe consciously and subconsciously you know there's more depth to it than just fighting. You're fighting yourself. You're
yeah,
just thinking that it just feels like there's something more to this that's been put in a game.
yeah. I mean,
More layers.
Yeah,
meaning.
for sure. I'd say that. And also, like, people would think that, because I guess a lot of the games, like the previous games, were kind of like a bit more targeted towards kids. And this one, in the Ocarina of Time, it felt a little bit more like not a crazy amount more, but like more adult in a way. It was darker.
Yeah,
Um, you know, it it's hard to explain it
but it's
because
able to sort of transcend that and reach both children and adults,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, for
Which
sure,
there's a lot
definitely,
of
yeah.
games where you just say, well, that's a survival horror game. Nobody, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, not going to play that game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And those games, they, obviously they have their place, right? Like, and I think they should totally, they should exist. Um, but I think for me, it deserves a place because of that moment. It was that generation of system, and it was like a
Yeah,
milestone, right? It was just like, okay, well, this is excellent. This is just well balanced. It looks great. I mean, at the time you had PlayStation, you had Saturn, and obviously there's limitations with those systems in
yeah,
terms of fidelity. Um, and you could argue that about Nintendo as well, Nintendo 64. And I know it was on the cusp of newer systems. So you had the Dreamcast that followed that a couple of years later, and then the PlayStation 2. But for me, it was just like, this is just, it would, for me, like, again, I'm not an RPG guy. I've
yeah.
tried.
If you talk about those other systems, then everybody's talking about the next generation of graphics, but it doesn't
Right.
really matter. Gameplay's king, isn't it? And I
Yeah, and
think
for me, it was like
Ocarina of Time is gameplay. It's put its highest priority, hasn't it?
yeah, yeah. And again, it's like I tried like, Secret of Mana, I tried Final Fantasy, I tried like I think there's something called Mother 3 on Super Nintendo.
Yeah,
And there was some other things like I think on the Mega Drive there was some other games as well. But for me that again, coming from someone that doesn't play RPGs, for me to sort of be, taken aback is saying a lot, right? Because I don't, it's not my bag, but the fact
yeah.
that I played it all the way through, and I loved it, just shows you how great that game was.
How much you loved
So
it.
yeah, so that's why I think it deserves a place in the top five.
Cool. Excellent. So what are we going for next then?
Um, we can talk about Doom.
Oh,
Yeah. So
yeah,
Doom
man.
is a bit of a
Let's talk about Doom.
Doom is a weird one, right? It's a bit of a strange choice, and it's probably another obvious
What
choice.
system were we talking about?
So we're talking about the PC.
Oh, wow. Did you play it
Yeah.
when it first came out?
So my brother had it. He had a 486,
Mm.
and I think it was at the time it was shareware. So you could download it like
Yeah, it
I
came
say
out.
download it. In those days, it was like a megabyte or two
It came out in
megabytes.
episodes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I never really played any first person shooters. I know there was Wolfenstein before that, and there was probably a whole bunch of stuff before that. Um, but
Yeah,
for
a lot of
me,
shooters were you were quite often in a spacecraft or a tank and you were shooting
right,
things.
yeah,
So
right, right, right,
it was quite early on in the character based FPS,
yeah,
because they did sort of spearhead um, that kind of game. Did id Software,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
it was very early on still. Yeah, so
yeah,
there weren't many games like that.
yeah, yeah. It was quite unique. Yeah, I know. Like I was reading something about the lighting, the way they did the lighting on it as well. It was very clever, really, really smart. The way they, I don't think they pre-baked because there wasn't really lights at the time, but the way the engine was working, it could give the illusion
Yeah,
of based on the distance of the camera or distance of the character, the lights would like or the shading would work in a certain way that you would get what appeared to be lighting. Like because there's like moments in the game where it's dark and it's bright, and at the time there was nothing like it, right? This is early 90s, right? Like 93 or whatever, 92 or whatever.
mm.
Um, and for me, it was just I remember because I never experienced PC. We had an Amiga. That was my brother's Amiga, but we never really had a PC, right? Never knew what a PC was. and that was the first time for me where I was like, wow, this is a PC and it's doing this,
Mm.
and it just looked amazing. It just looked amazing. It was just like mind blowing. You could like move
Well,
forwards and backwards in
that's
supposed
the
3D
that's the
space.
genius of John Carmack, I guess,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
programmed the
Yeah,
engine.
he's a clever guy.
He's
Yeah,
a really
super
clever guy.
smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, super smart. And you know, again, the thing with Doom is that even to this day, I have Doom and have Doom Eternal, and I think they're amazing games. I think they're great games. But it
Yeah.
just shows you the kind of impact that Doom had initially.
Yeah.
Every game, like after Doom, maybe, you know, the amount of FPS games, first person shooters that exist, right? You know, is insane. And it's because
Well,
of
Doom. They called them Doom clones, didn't they? Because they just
right,
literally felt
copies, right?
like the people just were so influenced by those, by Doom and those episodes of Doom that they couldn't help themselves
Yeah,
but
yeah, exactly.
make a
Yeah,
game
exactly.
that just
Yeah, and
was like it.
yeah, and it
Felt
sold.
like
It
it.
sold. And you just had like, yeah, you just I mean, when you think about the gameplay now, it's fairly rudimentary, right? You're just shooting things and running around. It's nothing like puzzle. There were puzzles, but they're not really sort of, nothing to sort of write home about. But I think it was just the fact that it was new. Well, yeah, I would say it was new. It was different, and that
It was over the top
um
as well.
it
It
was
was
over the
just
top. It was
crazy
just
and
nuts.
bloody.
Yeah, it was a great setting, right? You got a space marine on Mars where they open the gates of hell or whatever the premise was.
Yeah.
And it was just it had that look about it, right? And the music is it I think the music was really good as well at the time. Um and yeah, I just feel like again it deserves a place in sort of the Hall of Fame because
Hmm.
every other game has been influenced by it. And um like on my PC, right, I could probably open it up now and play it. I've got it on my phone
Yeah. Yeah.
and I could play it,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't think twice about playing it because I just like it. I just like playing it,
Yeah.
and I don't think a lot of games do that, right? I think very few games you open up and you think, oh, can I just be bothered,
I
you know
think its software been working towards that for a long time. They've been making a few games first person. I think they started with Hover Tank actually. A
Oh, okay, that
game.
was their first game, was it?
Yeah, not their first game. They did other sort of 2D, like a 2D platformer, but then they did a Hover Tank and then they obviously did Wolfenstein. And Wolfenstein was popular.
Yeah,
Wolfenstein 3D,
you could argue that was
but
probably the first of its
yeah,
kind, right? Yeah.
yeah. Well, the nickname that the grandfather of
Right,
the FPS, and then
right.
Doom is the father of the FPS, and basically once it was undeniable. Once that hit, you couldn't. I mean, there's probably some people still weren't aware of Wolfenstein,
Yeah,
but I mean, who wasn't aware of Doom?
yeah,
Who liked
exactly.
if you
Yeah,
liked video games, even if you didn't like Doom, you were aware of it. Everyone was aware of it.
yeah, for
It
sure.
just
And they made like a
couldn't
ton
be
of ports
ignored.
for it, right? Like every console pretty much got nearly a copy of Doom.
Yeah,
From the Super Nintendo to the Atari Jaguar, like it literally was like, you know, it was hot stuff, right? Like Street Fighter had like so many sort of versions of it, throughout. It just had that influence. It just had
and
that
everybody
impact.
who's making those kind of games was influenced by Street Fighter, and
Exactly.
everybody who's
Yeah.
wanted to make first-person shooter games, or even if they didn't, they found that they wanted to. They were
Yeah,
like
for
they
sure.
were playing it, thinking, "This is what I want to do. I want to make a game
Yeah,
like this."
totally.
You
And
know?
it was like, you know, you know, we, growing up, there were some foray. Like I again, like I always talk about like the Amiga, but there was like some foray into the 3D space, like into 3D worlds and stuff. And Doom was one of those things that was starting to sort of like you could see what could be done or how people would work, and how the technology was changing, that you could
Yeah.
really start to get a feel for like, okay, well this is a new type of game, right? This is a new way of playing. So
Yeah. I mean, it was Quake that was fully 3D, but
yeah,
it
yeah,
didn't it
yeah,
didn't
that's
seem
right.
to matter really.
No, no,
The
exactly. And now
the
obviously like it's
sprites
getting
and
to
the sprites were 2D. It didn't really matter
no,
at
of
all.
course not. No, I mean it was you know, I was playing on my brother's 486. There was no 3D acceleration really at the time, and we
Well,
weren't
what's that?
expecting miracles. So, yeah, exactly. I mean, like, you know, yeah, it was early 90s, right? So,
So, what's your final? Is it? No, no, you got two left, haven't
I
you?
got two
So
left.
go on
Yeah,
then.
so I've got two left. Okay, so, God, there's too many games. There's way too many games. And it was, you know, it's hard. It's hard. I want to put more on this list, but I can't. So
We,
I'll start
you
the
could
next
quickly go
game.
through your honorable mentions if you want at the end.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I've got a few in there. And to be honest, that's not even enough. Like the amount of games that we played to death.
Yeah.
There's like some of the runners up, like the Tomb Raider, the Resident Evil series.
Yeah, I've tried
I
it
put
myself, and
I put
I
Flashback in there.
struggled to get it down to 30. Oh,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
too hard. I've got like Half-Life 2. We should play Speedball. There was Chaos Engine, Tetris. I put the Arkham. I love Batman. They've got like,
Oh, the Arkham series.
GoldenEye, the Arkham series. We used to play Lemmings and Worms. There's like Shadow of the Beast. There's like F-29 Retaliator. We had Los Esprit. I mean, there was The Spy Who Loved Me. Then on the Mega Drive, there was like so many. It was like Sonic the Hedgehog, and then you know, Strider. I don't know. I don't think I played Shinobi. Um, you know,
Oh, yeah, I played.
there's just
Yeah.
way too many. There's way too many to list. There's just way too many. It's
Yes.
just impossible. Impossible. You know. But I'll talk about the next
There
game.
seems to be a theme here, though. There seems to be all in the kind of 90s, a lot of these games.
Yeah, yeah.
That
I
seems to be
mean,
like the golden age for you
I
of video games.
mean, if I talk about, if we look at the PlayStation 4, I would say the PlayStation 4 was the next best. Like PlayStation 2 was okay. I mean, you had like, those updates to like Metal Gear but I feel like for me it was more about like I skipped a generation, I think. I had a Dreamcast for a bit and then I moved on to I had a GameCube, Resident Evil 4, which I loved. And then I moved on to, it was Metroid Prime, and then I moved on to like I skipped PlayStation 2-ish. I had a PlayStation 2, I don't know if you remember when I was at uni.
Yeah.
But I moved on to PlayStation 3. I had an Xbox. So at the time Xbox 360 was kind of cool in quotation marks. It was Project Gotham, but then we soon got rid of that. I had a PlayStation 3, it was God of War. And then for me, the
But
PlayStation
nothing was
4.
blowing you away, was it?
No,
Is
I
that what you're
think
trying to say?
PlayStation 4, like I think for me the PlayStation 4 has been the best console to date. Like,
Right.
I don't have a PS, you've got a PS5, you know, but I feel like just in terms of the breadth of games,
Yeah.
it killed it. It really did. Last of Us and Uncharted and loads of indie games, and then, I mean people are still playing the PlayStation 4 now,
Yeah.
which is a real testament of what it has been as a system. But going back, sorry, again I'm digressing. So I mentioned like Speedball, Tetris. I loved. Even my parents loved that game. Like my dad used to play it a lot. We played StarCraft, Half-Life
Oh,
2, another great
StarCraft.
PC
Yeah.
game. There was kind of Hitman series. There was like God. PC was a bit weird in the early 2000, like the early 2000s, late 90s was a bit weird. It was a bit
The
of a
PC.
strange time for PC gaming, I think.
Hmm.
Um,
Sometimes it could be a bit quite flaky, couldn't it?
yeah, it was hit and
It's
miss.
not stable as it is now.
Yeah,
PC
it was
used to
yeah.
have some
There was no
really
Steam. Well, there was no Steam, right? I think
yeah
Steam revolutionized that space for game delivery and for
yeah
content.
yeah. There was almost sometimes you'd struggle with games. There was loads of things, dodgy stuff going on. It just wasn't working. Textures were just yeah
Yeah, it
Things
was.
you'd be thinking, why isn't this working? And there's just so many different systems, and it just
Yeah,
Steam, and I don't know, maybe there's other
yeah.
reasons
There was
that
no.
it just
I
seems to
yeah,
have the whole platform seems to be a lot more stable now.
yeah. I think you're right. I think there wasn't really any kind of like there was issues, and I think there was a few things that changed it. I think Nvidia. I mean, you had like 3D effects, you know, mid to sort of mid 90s to 2000, but then and I think Nvidia changed the game, and then Steam. I think those two things really sort of
Yeah,
created well rebirthed the PC ecosystem. Um, yeah, I mean, I will say I'm a predominantly at the moment a PC player, PC gamer because I just
yeah,
love the PC.
I love the PC.
Yeah, but I'll go back to my. So the next game in my list is Wipeout.
Ah, wow.
Yeah, and okay, so Wipeout. Wipeout
I
for
have
me.
it. I
Yeah,
have it here.
you
It's
have it. You have
I
it.
have
I
it
got it
here.
back in. I got it
Yeah,
back in the UK. I still have the.
it's a thing of
I was
beauty.
gutted because I just sold the original copy and ended up buying a second-hand version of it. But I still have it in the plastic casing and stuff.
You got it
Um,
wrapped up.
I haven't got it sealed. I mean, it must be
Okay.
worth a fortune if it was sealed.
Yeah.
But for me, that game was. I mean,
Hard to put into words.
yeah, it's hard to put it into words because. So okay. So when I was on holiday, I was an avid magazine. Like back in the day, we had magazines. Now you've got like iPads and iPhones, and you can get news whenever you want it. But in those days, it was monthly magazines,
Hmm.
and then you know as well that I remember reading about like I was adamant I was going to get a Sega Saturn, right? I was adamant.
Hmm.
Like I saw it, I was a Sega fanboy. I was like, I
Yeah.
want this,
Yeah.
right?
Good company.
Yep. And
Still
then
do good games.
yeah, they make great games, right? They still make, decent, they still publish stuff. And so I started at the time I started a new school, and I met a guy there. I met a dude there, and then we were hashing it out, right? We were talking about games and stuff. He was like a new friend. It was kind of exciting at the time. And he was just like PlayStation. And I was like, what's PlayStation? He goes, you need to get a PlayStation. Forget about Sega. Forget about Sega Saturn or whatever. So I think I started to do a
It's
bit
like
more research. I mean, obviously
it's
you
like a
read
guy
about
talking to you
PlayStation.
about leaving your current girlfriend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the best analogy. So I was just like, all right, let's have a butchers because I think the Sega Saturn came out a bit earlier than PlayStation. I don't know if that's correct in Japan. Um, because Sega was in a bit of a weird place. They freaking bodged the console like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
Um, and
Was the now was the Saturn, was that the one where it had like a dual processor, but
yeah, so it
they'd
had
messed
two.
up the architecture, so it didn't work well together.
So basically, what they did was they had these Hitachi chips, and I think they had one, and they thought, oh, this is going to be enough power, and then they found out what Sony was packing, and then they thought, okay, we need another one, but then the problem is those two chips, they're in series, they don't really communicate well with each other, or you need to figure out you
independent.
basically. Yeah, you needed to be a fairly good engineer to get them to sort of talk to each other
Yeah, I heard that
and get the most
developers
out of them.
just struggled to get them
It was
to
just a mess.
utilize the full
Yeah,
power of it because it was a powerful machine.
it was just a mess. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was just a mess. I mean, like what I love about the Saturn, which I later realized, was that it was excellent at playing beat 'em ups, like 2D beat 'em ups. As soon as because you can get a 4 MB cartridge that would sit on sit at the top of the console, and it was just killer. Like it had more memory, like it could do more frames of animation. But 3D side of things,
I
it
can't
was just
remember if
not
it
up to
was the
scratch.
Dreamcast or the Saturn or the Dreamcast. It could be the Dreamcast, where the version of Soul Calibur was actually superior to the arcade.
Yeah, it was the Dreamcast. Yeah,
And
yeah, you're right. Yeah,
yeah, and it was probably the first time, or one of the first times, because this had been a dream for years. People had been playing inferior versions of the arcade
Yeah.
for years, and it was quite a milestone in history where
Yeah, it crossed
it
the.
suddenly
I mean,
surpassed. It was by far superior to the arcade, and who
yeah.
would have thought, that a home
I mean, the
console could
Dream.
beat an arcade?
Yeah. I mean, literally, I remember reading about the Dreamcast, and it was made in tandem. So there was this arcade board called Naomi, and it was made in tandem with that. And because of that concept, it could do arcade conversions. And then that was it. It was over. Like the arcades were history,
Mm.
because why would you go out when you can play
Yeah,
high quality
you can
games at
still
home,
play
right?
with your friends, can't you? At home, it's not like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
it's got exclusivity to the social
Yeah,
side of it.
yeah. But it was a different experience, right? You could go to the arcade to meet people and sort of
Oh, it was
socialize
amazing when it
yeah,
lasted. Well, it
in a
lasted.
different way. So going back to what I was saying,
You talk about Wipeout.
yeah, so let's go back to Wipeout. Sorry, complete digress again. Yeah, so a buddy at school was like, "You need to buy this thing. It's amazing." So I was like, "Okay, let's do some research." I looked into it. I saw this game, and I was just like, "This looks awesome." And then I think I might have saw. So we in the UK we used to have this TV show called Games Master, and I might have seen it previewed, or I might have seen it like in adverts. But what I remember is that it just blew me away when I got the console, and that was one of the launch titles, and I got it,
Yeah,
and it was everything that like it. It was one of the first games that didn't have issues like the game, because in those days you didn't have good conversions, right, between countries. The Japan, not like now. You in those days you had PAL and NTSC, and NTSC used to run faster, right?
mm.
But for me, Wipeout was one of the first games where it was running. I think it was running full speed, maybe, or there wasn't issues because in those days, if you wanted the game to run at full speed, you'd have these thick black borders, top and bottom,
Yeah,
because if you increase the res, because like PAL was more lines, right? It was more lines of image, but because of that, the update, the cycle was slower. It was 50 hertz, right? So Wipeout for me was one of the first games where I thought, my God, this is just like, it's just excellent. It's frankly excellent. Like the conversion was just spot on.
mm.
It was a racing game, so I like racing games. It was futuristic, so I thought, okay, this is great. It really felt like a bit of a throwback to F-Zero on Super Nintendo.
Yeah,
It had a killer soundtrack. The music was so good. They were playing these games. Sony had this marketing campaign at the time
yeah. It was
where it would
unreal.
put consoles. Yeah, it would put consoles in nightclubs,
Yes,
right?
and
So
in pubs and bars as well.
yeah, it had that kind of, they were on the offensive with, they were out the gate, first time built. They had a different philosophy, right? They weren't about, this wasn't like another sort of
Yeah,
toy in
well, it
quotation
wasn't.
marks.
It wasn't for the kids. Not just for the kids. It wasn't just for the teenagers. They were aiming at the late teens, early mid.
It was like the
They're just
Walkman of,
the 20s. The people
yeah,
the people had a lot of disposable income. They were working and they had disposable income. And yeah, it was in
yeah, it was,
it was in the
yeah,
clubs, and it was
yeah,
cool. It was just
it
so
was, yeah,
cool.
it was cool, yeah,
And
and
people
and
were
and
openly
even
talking about these games, like they weren't ashamed to admit that they were
behind
playing
like,
games.
yeah, and I kind of felt like, it was the Walkman of the games industry, right? It was like this cool thing that people wanted, and for me, the Wipeout was a moniker of that,
Yes,
right? Or one of the
yeah,
monikers of that,
yeah.
and
I think along with
I
maybe Tekken and Gran
yeah,
Turismo.
yeah, Ridge Racer and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
it really felt like, it just felt like futuristic. It had like the CD, which not a lot of people embrace. I mean, there were a few consoles that embraced it, right? But what Sony had was, they just had the hardware. They had the brute hardware for it,
mm.
and then everything was really well considered. They got loads of developers on board. People were coming out the woodwork, left, right, and center. I mean, Sony had. It's funny because I think about PlayStation 4, and the PlayStation 4 for me was a throwback to the original PlayStation where they were like, okay, we're going to work with independent people. We're going to, we're not going to we're going to let people trade their games or, it was this kind of new thinking and new opportunities
Yeah.
to have a game system in a world where it was very sort of like very niche or you had people that were like, Nintendo with the whole kind of like publishing Iron Fist thing,
Yeah, everything's sort of closed down, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. Or Sega trying to like, trying to capitalize on the whole cool, but couldn't quite do it. And Sony did that, right? It took it to another level of like,
Yeah.
it was cool, and that's what for me Wipeout represented at the
Yeah.
time. It was this cool sort of like
Yeah.
philosophy of like
I think everything about
music.
it's just polished. I mean, like I said,
Yeah,
I've got the physical version of it here with me, and it's just the cover and the booklet you get inside. It looks like it's like a masterpiece in design.
yeah.
It's kind
You
of
had
thing
like
it's the kind of thing you'd
Republic.
expect to see on the front of an album, and everybody just go, "That's just like amazing
Yeah,
design." The typeface, just the look of it. It
yeah.
just
It was just
looks
amazing.
ultra
I think it
cool.
was called. I think they were called the Designer Republic.
The Designers
Um,
Republic, yeah, they did it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. They were, and again, it's like shit. Like we talk about present day, right? I've got like I'll be listening to Chemical Brothers, and
yeah,
partly the reason I'm listening to that stuff now is because I played the game and they were in the game.
yeah,
So that and for me it's a real big, like I always, that's why I think again it's another one that deserves a place in the sort of Hall of Fame because it just had that kind of impact, and it was an introduction to like what was PlayStation and what became like a generation of,
yeah.
great
It kind of
games.
broke the mold, didn't it, in its day?
Yeah, yeah,
It,
totally. Yeah, totally.
we're kind of lucky
It
to
had such it
lucky
had
to
such
live
an influence.
through it, aren't we?
Yeah, totally. I'm like, you know, when you don't get me wrong, like the games now, there's big production values, graphics look amazing. I mean, God, you can play games on iPad now and they look 1,000 times better than what they did on PlayStation. But I think what in a lot of ways in those days, because there wasn't this sort of like choice, or because there wasn't like you know,
Are you
there's a
talking
lot of
about? I think you're talking about appreciation, aren't you?
yeah,
You
exactly.
you
There
get
isn't this
something and you just appreciate it, and you just have
yeah,
that feeling where that's part of the reason you're blown away. You're not you know you're not expecting the world, and when you don't get the world, you kind of go, no, well, this isn't very good. And you just think, geez, do you realize like how good you guys have got it?
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you've just been given
Yeah,
this
exactly.
amazing world. It's pretty much close to perfect, and you're moaning about the fact that it isn't perfect. And
Yeah, yeah.
there's a few things that aren't quite right about it. It's like, blimey.
Like in our day, like the PlayStation had no Ethernet, had no hard drive. You had memory
Yes,
cards.
memory cards. Yeah,
It was wired controllers. Um, I had some consoles fail on me. You know, sometimes stuff would skip and stuff, but you didn't have like anti-aliasing. You didn't have like crazy draw distance. You didn't have like, um, quick loading times, but
mm.
the game was so good that none of those things mattered. They didn't
Yeah.
matter. There was a purity in it,
What
right? Like
was
it
there
wasn't like
had to matter. It had to work,
yeah, exactly.
because
Yeah,
otherwise
exactly.
you couldn't fall back on saying, well, it doesn't matter. There's loads of bugs in this, because it is. You could sort of say, well, the game world's huge. It's absolutely massive. So you could sort of say, there's going to be a few bugs here and there, and people kind of go, I kind of see where you're coming from. But back then it was, everything was tight, and it was,
Yeah.
you didn't expect it to sort of fall apart, and a
And
lot of the
I
time
think
it didn't.
yeah, exactly. And it was you didn't have there was no patching, right? I mean, yeah, okay, they brought out new games, they brought out sequels to the game, but they had to get it right. It was or otherwise it would have
Imagine,
been a disaster.
imagine patching Wipeout. Imagine,
Yeah, it just doesn't load properly, or like
imagine.
vehicles sort of like
Yeah.
go through the wall, and I mean, I'm not going to mention another game that had issues, but like I feel
Oh,
like and
yeah. giving out
Yeah,
another CD and saying, "Oh, this is like a freebie or only costs 50p,"
yeah,
and
or yeah,
this will
exactly, yeah.
patch it up if you just put it in your disk drive.
Yeah, if you play the game halfway through, you take out the disc and put it in to fix the rest of the level or something. Um, and for me as well, uh, with the guys that made the game, gone. What are they called? I can never get their name right. They
Psygnosis.
were yeah, they
Psygnosis.
were heavily yeah, exactly, yeah. They were heavily into the Amiga. They were making games for the Amiga.
Oh yeah, there were. Yeah,
So
cars.
for me,
They did Shadow of the Beast, didn't they, and
yeah,
stuff like that.
Shadow of the Beast, Discworld maybe? I don't know. Maybe they were Discworld. Yeah, but that was more a PlayStation thing. But for me, and they were British based as well. There was
Yeah, they did
there
Lemons
was
as
so
well.
many. Sorry.
I think they did some Lemons games.
Yeah, yeah, they worked on Lemmings. They did a whole
Yeah,
bunch of stuff. Yeah, and for
yeah.
me, that was like, you know, it was like the transition, right? It's the transition of what was going to happen. They were leaving behind that era, and then we were going into another era, and you could feel that,
Hmm.
and you could see it. Like it's not like, in a lot of ways, like, and again, this is my personal opinion, but I get, I get, the transition between the PlayStation 4 and the 5. For me, it's not that obvious, right? You've got ray tracing and you've got like 4K and stuff. But in those days, it was night
Jumps
and
were
day.
big, weren't they? Yeah,
Yeah, the
you had
jumps were massive.
massive jumps.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
which was it's so exciting, wasn't it?
yeah,
A new system was
yeah,
totally new.
yeah. It was
Whereas
buzzing.
these
Yeah,
days, you get a new system and you have to wait almost 4 or 5 years before you can start
yeah.
to think, you know what? There's no way you could play this on the previous generation. No
You just
way.
can't. Yeah, there's just no
Um,
way. Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
from almost from day one, you'd get the new console. You'd think you definitely couldn't play this launch title
You couldn't.
on the
Yeah,
old
you couldn't.
system.
Yeah, you couldn't. You couldn't play. I mean, it was, and I think that's yeah. I mean, for me, there was a lot of, for me again, and I always get, maybe not so much now, but like I used to get really excited about launch titles because for me, launch titles was always that sort of launch pad, right, into
Yeah,
a new
well,
era.
it was the jump, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like for me, Wipeout, just like a whole bunch of
Yeah, represents that
yeah, it's like a spearhead. So
that
but yeah.
magic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Um,
So
yeah. Should we move on to
what's
the
your
the
final
last
game
game?
then? Yeah.
So this is a bit of a weird one. Maybe not so obvious. And again, it's another
You
it's
worry me
another
when you
racing
say that. When you
game.
say it's a bit weird,
Well,
it's
I
not
mean,
plumbers don't wear ties or something, is it? Like,
no, but I feel like you could argue that maybe it's not that obvious, but it is obvious in that way. You know what I mean? It's not like because in my runners up list, there are a lot of games in there that could totally make the final five, right?
hmm.
You know,
Yeah. If I asked you 6 months from now or a
yeah,
year
I could
from
change my
now,
mind. Yeah, I could probably change
yeah,
my mind
of
and,
course,
and
yeah,
say to myself, oh, I made a mistake there, right? Um, yeah, I mean, you could
could
argue
redo
that,
it.
yeah, you could, I could put, I could easily put any of the games that I've mentioned in my runners up into that list.
Yeah.
Well, okay, maybe not all of the games listed, but like there's at least like 4 or 5 in there that probably deserve to be in the top 5.
Yeah.
But I picked Daytona USA
Right. Yeah.
as my last top 5 game
You
because
love your racing games, don't you?
I do love my racing games, yeah. Um, for me, again, this is a personal thing, so it's like I love hardware. I'm into
Yeah.
like new technology and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So I love you know, and for me,
This is the
Daytona
first
USA.
this is the first arcade game as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't have any arcade games in my list. Well,
Yeah.
apart from Street Fighter, which you could argue is an arcade. I guess it's an arcade game, really, at the heart of it. But for me, Daytona was a leap. Again, another leap of like generational fidelity, like visual fidelity,
Now it used the Sega AM2, didn't
yeah,
it? In
yeah.
in
Model
the
is it
in
Model
the
2 or Model 3?
2, I think, in
The 2.
the cabinet. So was it one of the first? I don't know if it's one of the first ones to use it or.
So Virtual Racing was before Daytona USA.
So that was using a different board, wasn't it? Because
Yeah,
it didn't have
so
bitmap sort of textures or anything. It was just flat
yeah, so
shaded.
it was yeah, so it was yeah, exactly. So like the original Virtual Racing was flat shaded.
Yeah.
And I think so Sega Model 2. Yeah, it was the first game on the Sega Model 2, right? And I guess like I don't know what Virtual Racing was. Maybe it was like Model 1 or whatever. But for me, I think again, it was one of those games where we played it to death.
Yeah.
And there was a few reasons why. It was one of the first games that ran at 60 frames a second in the
It
arcades.
seemed as smooth as butter back in the
Yeah,
day,
and in
didn't it?
those days, you didn't have 60 frames a second. I mean, now you can have 120, 240, 500, whatever frames a
Yeah.
second. So in those days, um, it was crazy, crazy smooth. It was crazy fast. There was
Yeah.
text. There was kind of like texturing. Yep. So like the first Virtual Racing didn't have like little
Yeah.
flat shaders and
So
polygons,
not only was it
and
moving at 60 FPS, but it was textured as well.
it was textured as well. Yeah. So the music was
Amazing.
phenomenal, and it's funny because like a lot like already two games out of the five were in the same year. So it was like that sort of transitional period of 3D, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it looked amazing. It played amazing. You know, it was at the arcades. Um, and it just the sound, the music design, the realism. You could play eight-way. I mean, there used to be a thing in the arcades where you could play eight player
Oh, so I
Daytona
was about to ask how
as
many of
Sega
these
World.
machines could get actually hooked up to one
Yeah, you could
another.
have eight-way Daytona,
Wow.
and they would take
That's
a picture of your face, and then you would race against each other, and it was phenomenal. Like it was literally the most amazing multiplayer experience you can possibly imagine. Because
yeah. Like racing
again,
with your friends. And
8 people as well, not just like because like in the only games that I can think of really is there's a few games, right? So you obviously had Mario Kart for the Nintendo 64, which was four-way. You had like Street Fighter, which was like two players. You had Track and Field on the
mm,
PlayStation, which was like I
yeah,
don't know
you
how
had
many
some of
players that
those
was.
fighting games like um like The Simpsons.
Yeah, or you
Which
had
was
Micro
four
Machines
man
where you could
and
play like four
Teenage
players.
Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was a
Yep,
four-player
yep,
game, which is I love
four-player
that
game.
game
Yeah.
actually. I love the
I was
music
gonna
and
mention, I was gonna put that in my runners-up list, but I held back
well, yeah,
because that was
when you hear that music in the arcades and you're going, oh, is that a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? And if you got like three of the friends, amazing. And I think they had an X-Men one that was six-player,
was six
which
players as
came
well.
later
Yeah,
on, which might have been
yeah.
roughly 93,
But you,
94.
but I mean,
But
if you look at it now,
eight-player,
there
yeah.
aren't there aren't that many people that can play. You can go to LAN parties, right? And you
Hmm.
can play like against people and play with like 20, 30 people, or whatever. But in those days, I don't know if there were LAN parties in those days. I don't think there was, or maybe there was. But it was just the fact that you could go to the arcade, play with all your friends,
Yeah,
and it was just this experience where it was just phenomenal. It was
yeah.
just amazing, and a lot of the technology that Sega had, a lot of that Model 3, Model 2 business, that was from Lockheed Martin, who designs like
Wow.
fighter planes and spy
Yeah,
planes. So
that's incredible.
I think they bought a license for it, and they ended up building a lot of the technology on that. But yeah, it was just amazing. And there's been remakes of it. There was a remake on the Dreamcast. There was terrible conversion on the Saturn. Um, and I just feel like, again, it was one of those experiences where we used to go to the arcades with my brother, and there was nothing like it. I mean, I
Hmm.
remember playing Crazy Taxi with you at uni,
Oh
and it was
yeah, yeah.
good. It was good,
It was a bit of
but it
fun, wasn't
wasn't.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't. There was no way it touched Daytona. Just no
Well,
way.
it wasn't multiplayer, was it? For a start.
No, it wasn't multiplayer. No, no way. It wasn't multiplayer. And I feel like again, it's one of those games where it was you could see the transition from like you could really see what the technology could do. was beginning to do, like it was that 60 frames a second for me. That was like,
Yeah.
Because you look at, we're talking about Wipeout. Wipeout was very much, I think that was just like a fixed, I don't know if it was fixed 30 frames a second, but when you play something at, in those days it wasn't, you didn't need 60, you don't need 60 frames a second to play a video game, right? I think this is the misconception that a lot of people have. I mean, obviously it depends on what game you're playing, but generally speaking, you can get by with 30. Unless you're playing against people, maybe you need like the crazy frame rate to like, if you're playing FPS maybe. But in those days, 60 frames was unheard of. Nobody played at 60 frames a second. So I think, I think there was just, for me it was just like, wow, this is amazing. And it really sort of
the experience just blew your mind. And the sound as well, because it's around, it's around you,
music.
And if you've got 8 machines, the sound of all those
Nirvana.
8 machines going.
It was just like crazy loud. And I think as well, like, I don't think there was any other game like Virtual Racing and Daytona. There was nothing like it. There was just nothing. When I think about it, there was nothing on the PC. There was nothing on, PlayStation hadn't come out yet, and even like Sega Saturn was like months after that.
Yeah,
so there wasn't anything.
I think you've always got to, consider what came before it to fully appreciate what you're looking at. If you just think about the few years leading up to it, and just look at, say, this is the kind of games we were playing, the kind of racing games we were playing.
Yeah.
Before Daytona, and then this is Daytona, and then you can kind of go, okay, I get it now. Don't think about today. Don't think about 10 years ago or anything like that. 20 years
exactly.
Ago.
I mean,
think about of its time, and then you suddenly see how incredible it was.
Yeah, I mean, I could sit here and argue to you that Gran Turismo is way better, right? It pioneered the physics, and you had customization of vehicles, and like, it was the first time you had proper physics in a game, and like, but for me, I think it's hard to not recognize Daytona. It's hard, or Virtua or whatever. It's hard not to recognize those games, right? It's very difficult because, I can't do that because of the impact it had on me, right? I can't say. I mean, obviously, from a technical point of view, Gran Turismo is better. If we compare apples to apples, but for me, it was just the sort of flair and kind of like the initial technology that was there. It was that kind of like, wow, this is like, you had like a cute, like, I mean, it sounds terrible now, right? But you had like a cloud map. I think it was a cube map or a sphere map, and you could see that reflection in the window. And it obviously isn't, it's not real, but like, and I know like Gran Turismo had that. You actually starting to see like the same sort of concept.
Yeah, see on the bodywork.
Yeah, because you didn't have that in Daytona. I think you only had it on the window. You didn't have it on the body. But like, I just don't know. Like, I feel like Daytona is one of those games that, for me, it was one of the last remnants of the arcades. I feel like there was a few games that had come out in that period, and you could tell that you'll never have that experience again.
Yeah.
In the arcade, because the technology got so good, and there was a shift, right? It was all going console based. So.
Yeah, a shining light in the arcade.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a beacon, right? It was like a bit of a beacon. But I mean, who knows? I might change that. Like I said, I might one day I think, what, I've missed a beat here. I should put Metal Gear in there, or I should put like, I should replace this with Metal Gear or Gran Turismo. But if you told me the 5 top consoles, that would be very easy. But 5 top video games is very difficult. It's just a very difficult.
Yeah. No, I know where you're coming from. Exactly. I've been trying to do the same, and I could look at that list, like I said, 6 months from now, and go, I've got to change my mind. I've got to change. I've got to put this in. I've got to take that out. Because I don't know, for some reason I've just had a little bit of insight. I've realised something. You've changed your mind, haven't you? But
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean,
And then I could
like I
ask you in a
said,
year, and it could come back to this.
yeah, for sure. And the thing is as well, like there's so many games, like you know, it's tricky. It's like for me, I always think of the games that I spent the most time on, right? Like all the games that we played, which ones did you come back to, and which ones,
Yeah.
in a period took a lot of, I could have put
And
GoldenEye on that
you
list.
you always come back to thinking about them as well at some
Yeah,
point.
yeah. They have a, like, one of my favorite favorite movies, one of my sort of cheesy movies. Is hackers, and hackers, they were playing Wipeout in the movie.
Uh,
So every time I think about that, or like I said, a piece of music, or like and that could change, right? New games are coming out all the time, and I might think about like another game that I used to play, and
hmm.
I haven't mentioned any of like the Game Boy games we used to play,
Yeah.
or hardly any of the Mega Drive
Well, you
games, or even the
mentioned
Amiga, right?
you did mention Tetris, and
I did mention Tetris. Yeah.
I take it you meant the Game Boy version.
Yeah, so for me, the Game Boy version is what we experienced. Yeah,
Yeah.
like super, like my you know, it, yeah. But it's funny because I didn't put it in the list because I don't think I could come back to it purely because,
It's on your extended list, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. You need a Game Boy for a start to play it,
It's
and
on the Switch. You can play it on the Switch.
oh, it's on the Switch. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
they've
good to
got
know.
the
Yeah,
Game Boy emulator, haven't they,
yeah.
on the Switch?
So, but it's again, we're at different ages, right? If you ask someone else that's like 20, 25, 30, then
Yeah.
they might have a different opinion of what, of what they experienced. Like,
Yeah, you might get maybe World of Warcraft or something.
yeah, or StarCraft, or you might get, the first time they bought a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 3. You know, I always think about the PlayStation 3 sometimes, about how complicated that was to code for, but then there was a lot of pioneering software technology
Yeah.
stuff that came from that.
Some good
People that
games,
played
right?
the PlayStation 2, yeah, or the Dreamcast. Again, they were trying to push innovative. There's the Getaway on PlayStation 2. There was like, Shadow of the Colossus, which
Mm.
I should have put that in my runners up thing. You like Tenchu as well.
Oh my god!
And obviously
Don't get me
that's got
started
like
on Tenchu. I love it.
yeah, that's got a place in your heart, right?
Yeah,
So
it's a special place for me, but most people
yeah,
I just
so
never played it, or even at the time they weren't that bothered about it. But
yeah, but
exactly.
again, yeah, again, I mentioned Flashback, and then there's obviously like not Alone in the Dark. What's the other one? I've forgotten what the other game's called by those guys, but
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah. Oh
yeah.
god.
I mentioned Streets of Rage. I played some others. You mentioned Turtles. Turtles was like huge. I mentioned Gunstar Hero. There's like Rocket Knight Adventures. I mean, on you got Donkey Kong Country on Super Nintendo, and then if you go even further into the past, you've got like Asteroids. You've got
Mm,
like Space Invaders. I mean, you know better than me actually with regards to that era, but yeah, it was just a different time, different time. So.
yeah. Cool. Well, that's been great, Ed. It's been really
All
cool.
right, no worries.
Yeah,
It was good to
and
chat
it's
about it.
just
Yeah, it brought up some memories.
yeah, and it's just the passion comes through. This is great. Just hearing like all this passion and everything. And
Yeah, yeah, it just, yeah, games are great. They just have like, it's like, books and films, right? It's funny because you don't really think, but people don't really think about it that much, but like the power of stuff,
yeah, and you
you
can
know.
play a lot of games. I mean, I play a lot of games, and I play a lot of games that I would say, yeah, they're good. They're average. They're good games. I'm pretty generous, really. If I was going to
Yeah.
rate a game, I'd say it's a good game. But in a way, I'm saying it's an average game. Really, it
I mean,
hasn't ignited anything. And then I'll play something that
yeah.
really just blows me away. Something that I just fall in love with, and I just think this is what I live for. I live to find something that really I just can't wait to play it. And when I'm away from it, I'm just thinking, I just want to play that game. I want to get back to it. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
so good. It's so
It's
good.
so good, right? Yeah, it's so good. And I think maybe the issue at the moment is a lot of disposable games.
Hmm.
There's maybe too many.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people's attention spans are probably not what they used to be.
Oh, didn't you say you're
But
going to try Subnautica?
I'm gonna try that. Yeah, you mentioned it's really, really good, right? So I'm gonna give it a
Yeah,
go. I'm gonna
that's
definitely give it
that's
a go.
definitely one of
Yeah.
my favorite games.
Yeah, I'm gonna
It's
give that a
amazing.
bash. I'm gonna finish Cyberpunk and then gonna give that a go. And then I need to make a list of things that I want to play. I've really sort of been like everyone bangs on about my friend was telling me about
Should
Elden Ring.
play. Yeah, I haven't played that yet.
It's supposed to be amazing. Yeah, it's supposed to be great.
Should play Outer Wilds on PC.
Which
That
game?
Outer Wilds. The
Okay, yeah,
you
I'll check
remember
that
we
out.
spoke about that once
I think you
before?
mentioned it. Yeah, I think you
Yeah,
mentioned it. Yeah.
the space game exploration, and you're stuck in a time loop. It's amazing. The imagination they've put into that game world is exceeds most games out there. It's incredible. It really is, and it's just
I'll have
it's
to
a
add it to,
joy.
what is it called?
Outer
Outer
Wilds.
Wild.
Well, there's two games came out with similar titles: Outer Worlds and Outer Wilds.
Yeah,
And they came out in
exactly.
the
Yeah.
same year. Outer Worlds was like a space kind of Fallout game,
Okay,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and Outer Wilds was something completely different. But
Because I get confused. So many different game names.
yeah, I would say
Oh, you know
play
what? I think
Outer
I've seen
Wilds
this
is amazing.
advertised. Is amazing, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but
Some banjo, like
there's so many
being in the
good
sea.
games to sort of
Yeah.
try, and I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great games, right? And you know, a lot of great experiences.
and
It's
sometimes
just
you'll find something that you'll least expect. It's worth trying different kinds of games because sometimes you'll
yeah,
find something that you least expect. You know, I really liked the Darkest Dungeon when I played that, and even though
right.
it's a really tough game, I just love the art style, love the music, I
Yeah.
love the pressure it puts you under. It's great.
Yeah, because you're more into indie games, right? And are you more into RPGs as well?
Yeah, I like RPGs, third person action adventure, and yeah, the kind of the genre I love that you hate, I think, is turn based.
Yeah,
You don't like turn based.
Hate's a strong word. I mean, turn based is. So I've played turn. I think I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I have played some turn-based games, but it's just not my. Honestly, like I'm just not like in the kind of Final Fantasy space. It just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't really do anything for me. I'm more about like, and I get it. Like people love it, and I can see the place for it for sure. It's like playing chess, but for some reason yeah, like that again. That's one of the things that pulled me into Zelda was the real time aspect of it. But
Yeah,
I can see why the turn based thing is evocative. Is that the right word? Is that right?
it's
Right
just
word?
it can be very immersive because
Right.
you really
You have to consider each decision, right?
you're really
Yeah.
thinking about how everything works together, kind of like chess, but more elaborate in some ways because there's so many more. Each part of the puzzle has more elements to it. So like
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
XCOM game is perfect for me. A well-made
Yeah. So like in that,
XCOM
yeah.
game.
So like in that capacity, I think playing XCOM is fine. Like I don't have an issue playing turn based from that point of view. I think it was just more from the sort of like Final Fantasy aspect. I just for some reason I just couldn't handle it. It's just
Yeah, it's not for everyone.
yeah, this is it, right?
You got to stay true to yourself, not play something just because
Yeah,
people have told you it's great, but
totally.
because you feel like
Yeah,
you would love it.
totally. Yeah, and that's the thing. People talk about like there's always this thing where people big up stuff, and then you actually experience it. And you think, oh, actually, it wasn't as
Well,
good as people.
yeah, I think everybody's got a game or some games that it's almost like they were not embarrassed, but they might rather not say that they hate or that they don't like as much as
Yeah,
everyone else. Like I think that kind of Dark Souls games, I'm not really a massive fan of.
yeah.
You know, but it's very popular.
I kind of agree with you to an extent. I think with I think essentially what they've done is, and it's very clever, very smart from a development point of view, is that they've just taken the concept of getting super frustrated and turned it to 11, because there is I'm sure there's a science behind that, right? The
Psychology.
Yeah, it's like a balance between like being frustrated and giving up, and then just but then like having frustration, but it's on the border,
Yeah.
so it's like an
I
addictive
have,
thing where you think
yeah,
like,
I have experienced it. I've experienced it
yeah, totally,
with Demon Souls. I've experienced it
yeah,
with that and Bloodborne because I like both those games.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
think I'm very on the any, and then some of the Dark Souls games I didn't like at all. There's something about they must have just pushed me too far, and I just couldn't enjoy them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's the thing. You've got to really be into that style of
a
like I
masochist.
used to love those kind of games back in the day. I used to really like if it infuriated me, I just wanted to beat it, right? Regardless of how many times. But I think it's a fine line, right? Like you can have a game where it's just like impossible, and then it just becomes like, I think we were playing this
I
me
think
and my
the
bu- like sorry.
I think the older I get, I think the less tolerance I have because just I
Yeah,
realize that
exactly.
time's ticking. I've got less time
Yeah, less
in my
time. Yeah,
life.
so we were playing like me and my buddy were playing Alien Fireteam,
Oh yeah,
and we tried like we got to this point where it was like, this is so hard, and we tried it like 2 or 3 times, and we're done. That was it. And it's a shame in a way, because I think, like I said, actually, it's
yeah.
not a bad game. It's all right, but
Well,
like, yeah,
you if you asking yourself a question, am I enjoying this? And the answer's definitely not. Then
yeah,
you feel
and
like,
we
well,
just
why am
yeah,
I playing?
why am I wasting time on this thing? Yeah, and that's what we did. We were just like, this is naff. We're done. So, because it was just like, well, we've tried it once, we tried it a second time, and we tried it third. We ended up doing it a third time, I think, and it was just like, there is no way around this. Like, there's just you just get
Yeah,
annihilated, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm not down for this. If I was 15 again, yeah, possibly I'd go at it like the clappers, but you know, but these days, like you said,
on that note,
yeah. Anyways,
yeah. Well, that's
cool.
right. Well, yeah, I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah,
And
it was very, it was a good like retrospect, and good walk down memory lane a little bit. So
yeah, cool.
yeah,
All right,
cool.
I'll see you soon then.
All right,
All
take
right,
it easy.
take it easy, man. Bye.
See ya.